Okay. Go.
As Pat said, we're going to talk about decision fatigue, otherwise known as do whatever you want. I can't decide one more thing for myself. I was surprised, and I expect you were surprised if you looked at the announcement for this class and saw that the average person makes about 35,000 decisions a day. I know it feels like that some days, but if I had to count, I would never have thought about counting that high. But let's think about starting first thing in the morning. You wake up, you decide whether to open your eyes, whether you're going to pretend you're still asleep for a while, whether to get out of bed, what to do next, what to wear. And in these days with a COVID pandemic, you have even more decisions to make that are weightier, such as how do I get groceries safely? Do I allow friends to visit? And can I even get close enough to my own family members to have a comforting touch or just a time to sit down with them? I looked up, interestingly enough, the meanings of the word decision and choice. And I'm not going to talk about the difference that the dictionary has in the meanings of those because it gets fairly existential and kind of difficult to understand. For our purposes today, we'll use the words decision and choices interchangeably because we do make decisions when we make choices. And we all like to have choices because it makes us feel good. The more choices we have, the more control we feel like we have over our world. Does this look like you? I'm a little stressed right now. Just turn around and leave quietly and no one gets hurt. There are a lot of days that I feel this way. Sometimes just for the reason that the world's there, and other times because of the dementia caregiving. The combination, though, of the dementia caregiving in a world where there's so much going on and so many new things we have to adapt to, it's very overwhelming at times, though, and we feel like all we're doing is making one decision or one choice after another. So let's talk about what decision fatigue is, get a little understanding of that. It's the emotional and mental strain that comes from a burden of decision or choices, one after another, nonstop, every day. It's the feeling you get when you're overly stressed by those endless numbers of decisions you have to make with no relief in sight. And you'll often recognize it because it feels like a deep sense of weariness. What happens as we have decision fatigue is that the results of our decision deteriorate in quality. We don't make the kinds of decisions that we would make under other circumstances. One way to look at decision fatigue and its effects on us is that the effect is similar to lack of sleep. It results in a lack of emotional intelligence, which means that you aren't as aware of other people, you don't have as much ability to control your emotions or express your emotions, and you don't do as well with interpersonal relationships. It affects our ability to multitask, which as a dementia caregiver, we frequently feel like we're doing all day, every day. It also inhibits our initiative to think about new and innovative solutions to problems, to assess the risk involved in making a decision, and to anticipate the consequences of decisions that we make. The more choices or decisions you make throughout the day, the harder it becomes for your brain to continue to make those decisions. And what you find is that the driving force for us becomes simply doing or making whatever decision or choice it takes to get finished with something, to get it out of our way. And this is especially true when our willpower is running very low. So, what are some other signs of decision fatigue? There are three of these that I would group together: procrastination, indecision, and avoidance. Technically, they're a little different. Procrastination is putting off that decision. I'll decide more about that later, or I'll make that decision later. Indecision is just doing nothing. And avoidance is putting off making a decision. But we're more likely to say, I just can't deal with that right now, rather than I'll decide about that later, that you see in procrastination. What happens when we have so many decisions to make is that our brain creates shortcuts to save our energy and to save our brain power. And as we put off making decisions, as we procrastinate, as we do nothing, as we say we just can't deal with something right now, we are bypassing any consideration of what the trade-offs are for making the particular decision and any emotional costs that might be involved. So all of these results in our brain taking one of those shortcuts, which is doing nothing. Another shortcut that our brain can take when it's overwhelmed with decisions is the one of impulsivity. I'll just pick one without thinking about the consequences, without thinking about what that may mean happens next. A good example of decision fatigue and impulsivity is one that I found talking about a shopper in the grocery store, which we all can identify with, or at least we used to be able to identify with. And what happens as you go through a grocery store, typically, especially if you're buying a large number of groceries, is that you're looking at sale items, you're looking at produce to decide which is the better one to get, which looks like it will last longer, which is the ripe one, which is going to taste best, what's on sale, what brand of soup do I get? And so as you go through the grocery store, you've made tons of decisions and tons of choices about items that you're going to purchase based on whatever criteria that are important for you. So when you get to the cash register and you're waiting in line, what's all around you? All that chewing gum and candy and snacks that we probably wouldn't usually buy, but somehow they're appealing and we just grab one without, again, thinking of the consequences. So that's a good example of impulsivity. And grocery stores frequently take advantage of knowing that and put those things that we're more likely to buy on impulse right there where we check out, and we have to stare them in the face. So what do we do about decision fatigue? How can we help defeat that? First of all, establish routines. All of us have some routines, and I will be the first to say that your routines change when you are caring for someone with dementia. And sometimes it feels like you can't establish routines because there's so much unpredictable in that care. However, we can establish routines for what time we eat various meals, for what time, what clothes we wear, when we take a bath, when the person with dementia takes a bath. There are a lot of decisions that are routine or could be routine. Who cares if you wear the same outfit every Monday and a different one on Tuesday and a different one on Wednesday? Who cares about that? And it does make making those decisions easier. Think about, as you think about clothes, Steve Jobs. Did you ever see him in anything besides black pants, a black top, typically a turtleneck, and a black jacket? Obama was another person who typically wore a lot of the same colors. And one of the things that President Obama said at one point in time is, I wear the same outfits routinely so I can save my energy for the decisions that really make a difference. So think about your routines and think about what kinds of things you can kind of automate without making a daily decision about them. In addition to helping with decision fatigue, most people with dementia function better when there is routine and predictability in their life. So you kind of kill two birds with one stone with that approach. Batch your work. This is sometimes difficult to do when you're caring for someone with dementia, but what we mean by this is do like things at the same time. For example, maybe it works best for you to spend one day a week figuring out your menus and perhaps pre-cooking and freezing some things. Maybe it works best for you to plan what you're going to do ahead of time, and so you eliminate the minutes that you spend at the point in time that you're ready to do something, thinking about what's next, because you already have a list and you already have some priorities. It certainly helps if you are going to use a computer for email or to pay bills or whatever, that you do all of your computer time as much as possible at one time during the day so that you aren't going back and forth. The other issue that we have if we go back and forth on a task is that we forget what we're doing or what we've already done. And sometimes, or many times, it takes us longer to complete the task than if we had batched everything and been able to do all of that task together. Another thing that helps with decision fatigue is to delegate a decision. We hesitate to do this because we're afraid of losing control or that someone won't choose what we choose to do. How many times have you felt like after you've asked someone if they would help you with something and they start doing it and you either say, or you're at least thinking, but that's not the way I wanted it done? It's hard to delegate decisions, but for your own sanity as you work as a dementia caregiver over time, it really helps to be able to do that. Examples might be maybe your daughter or daughter-in-law or son-in-law could come up with menus for you for each day. If they know the kind of food that you eat and how you tend to approach meals and what kind of balance you have to have in your meals, or whether there's special dietary needs that have to be met with those. It might be that someone can call back individuals and give them updates so that you don't have to decide when you're going to call someone back and what you're going to say in that conversation. One of the tools that we've suggested in other classes that you use as a dementia caregiver is to make a list of things that other people can help you with. If you can do that either as you think of things or try to pull some time away and think through that list, then when someone asks you how they can be helpful, you can simply pull up your list and give them something off the list, which then saves some brain power of deciding and going through all the options for what that person may or may not be able to do. Remember that people really want to help when they ask if they can help and are looking for something concrete. So you can delegate some of those responsibilities to other people and thus minimize decisions that you have to make around that. Involve other people. Again, bounce options off of other people, even if you aren't delegating the decision to them. Being able to talk to other people and talk through options really helps us make better decisions. In a study that was done and published by the Harvard Business School, looking at 50 years worth of information and studies on judgment and decision making, the one piece of advice that kept coming up to help with decisions and making good decisions is to ask another person's opinion or input. So don't hesitate to ask other people. They will frequently think of things that you won't have thought of, or say, gee, this is pretty straightforward, when your mind has been so tangled up that it's hard to even see the easy responses and easy decisions sometimes. Pull back from the chaos. Dementia caregiving, in most instances, is chaotic. Sometimes most of the day, sometimes just in spots. This is a piece of advice that's very difficult, again, to follow because of the nature of caregiving. But if you can find a time that someone can come in and visit your loved one, or they can sit on the porch and socially distance and talk, you may be able to have some time to yourself to think through and make decisions about the best approach for some of the problems that are facing you. Another option might be using time if your loved one takes a nap, or if they go to bed earlier than you do, as a way to get away from some of the daily chaos. Set deadlines for decisions. If we've looked at things and thought about all the options, and yet we find that what we're continuing to do is put off making a decision, sometimes we just have to say, I'm going to make the decision. I've already looked at the pros and cons. I just need to do something. Make a decision and stick with it. One technique that's suggested for setting deadlines is if you've got a time set aside that you're trying to think through something, is to use a timer. Another technique is to say, I'm going to make a decision by 4 o'clock today, one way or another. One of the best antidotes for feeling overwhelmed is making progress. So the forward momentum that's created by finally making a decision will often give you energy to keep moving on the next thing that needs to be done. Consider the opposite. Usually if we think about decisions, we come up with two things that we think might be the best options. Take each of those options and think about what would happen if you did the opposite of that option. For example, one question you might want to ask yourself, and that many caregivers ultimately ask themselves at various points in this journey, is, what would happen if I decided to place this person in some kind of facility? The opposite of that question is, what would happen if I don't? And a lot of times we forget to consider the what would happen if I don't, and preserve some of our abilities as caregivers, because regardless of whether the individual is at home or in a facility, you still are in a caregiver role, and a very important caregiver role for that person. This happens to be one of my favorite ways to defeat decision fatigue, which is eat a healthy snack. It's interesting because in the discussion I found of healthy snacks, what it really talks about is eating something that's high in glucose to give your brain an energy boost. Somehow high in glucose and healthy snack doesn't go together for me, but I really liked the high in glucose. Candy, especially chocolate, helps make any decision easier. And the last thing to consider as a way to help defeat decision fatigue is remember why you choose to be a caregiver. For almost all of us, being a caregiver is a choice. And we make that choice multiple times every day to continue to do this. Think about why you do it. In most instances, it's out of love, out of respect, out of true caring for this person. And that can help provide guidance for how you make some decisions if you have that as your guiding light when you're deciding or facing decisions. One of the quotes that I found about related to this concept is this one: the bottom line of decision making involves determining which potential will offer the best possible outcome based on what we now know. We cannot know what impact a decision is going to have on tomorrow. We can only know what we know now and make the best decisions. So part of another piece of dealing with decision fatigue is make a decision and let go of it. There are very few decisions that we make in life that are irrevocable. We can often go back and completely undo a decision or undo part of it if that part is problematic. But we don't have to, we aren't stuck with whatever decision we make and all of its implications. Tony Robbins, who is an author, life coach, motivational speaker, and philanthropist, has been quoted as saying, when you know what's most important to you, making a decision is quite simple. Again, that is putting your decisions in the context of why you choose to be a caregiver and why that's important to you and important to the person for whom you're providing care. What is your goal as a caregiver will help frame a lot of your decisions. And I liked this cartoon just as an ending because many of us feel guilty every day because we've gotten angry at our loved one with dementia. And I think it helps us to remember that just because we're mad at someone doesn't mean that we stop loving them. It also doesn't mean that we stop doing our best and doing what we can to make the best decisions possible for that person.